Welcome to our study of the Song of Solomon, chapters 5 through 8. I wish I had a parent that told me about education and told me specifically about the ways of the world uh, so that we could teach a child in the way he or she should grow. Although I had wonderful, loving parents that taught me the Torah, that taught me the law, they did not give me a way to apply these things to life. Solomon has been doing that. We saw that through Proverbs, and now we see it through the Song of Solomon. He doesn't back off from the idea of growing in love, because love is a key to understanding other human beings and to understand our God. And so I'd like to look at this journey through the Song of Solomon as a way of teaching others the way one should develop in a stature of love. So he starts off, and we see the important aspects of the key verses in chapter 5. If we begin with chapter 5, verse 6, he says, I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and had gone. My heart went out to him as he spoke. I searched for him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer me. In verse 7, he continues and says, the watchmen who make the rounds in the city, they found me, and they struck me and wounded me. So here we see the great Shulamite woman saying that she is lovesick again. Do you remember when you were lovesick? That is, you were so much in love that it made you sick, that you had to have that desire for the other, and that if somebody took that person away from you, or if there was a time of departure between you and that other, then there was this kind of feeling of despair, loneliness, alienation. So as she begins thinking about this, we're either inside her heart, or some commentaries say that she is dreaming about entering a room and finding her beloved gone, and he might have left after a quarrel with her. She feels abused. In fact, literally, she might be abused by the watchman, feeling the violence of the times. You see, there was such an important need for support and protection and interdependence on one another in the Israelites. So his legs, she goes on to describe him, are like alabaster. They're like pillars of alabaster set upon pedestals of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is full of sweetness, and he is wholly desirable. This is my beloved. This is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. So again, she's teaching other women that when you're seeking somebody in love, they have to be a friend also. This description of him is his strength. It's an image of him as a statue on a pedestal, an admiration of her love. So we see this all through the Song of Solomon. They love one another. They have this sense of seeing each other's beauty, not just externally, but internally. Then in chapter 6, we look at verse 13. He is also missing her. He says, come back come back, O Shulamite. Come back, that we may gaze at you. And so he wants this reconciliation. He wants this reuniting with his love. In chapter 7, verse 5, he says, your head crowns you like a caramel, and the flowing locks of your head are like purple threads. The king is captivated by your tresses. How beautiful and how delightful you are. My love, with all your charms, your stature is like a palm tree. So again, we continue this comparison. He is like a statue, a strong statue, but she is like a palm tree. So her hair captivates him as well as her charms, and he compares her to this peaceful, protective, shading palm tree. Don't forget, Jesus comes into Bethlehem. Jesus comes into Hosanna with his palm tree waving. Verse 11, come, my beloved, let us go out into the country. Let's spend the night in the villages. Let's rise early, go to the vineyards. Let us see whether the vine has budded, and if its blossoms have opened, and whether the pomegranates have bloomed. There I will give you my love. Again, we see this idea of going to the idyllic, beautiful country away from the city, seeing that we're going to have this humdrum, ordinary life, routine life in nature and beauty, and they're missing. So we have to sometimes escape to the country. We have to escape to find the beauty and time for love and relationships. When's the last time you took your spouse or your loved one away from the ordinary into the extraordinary world? And so in chapter 8, he says, I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, who used to instruct me. So this was very important to Israelite children. They are raised by the parents. They are homeschooled. They are, in a sense, developed in their instruction. And all through Proverbs and Song of Solomon, we're given instruction, discipline, ways of living through life. I would give to you spice wine to drink from the juice of my pomegranates. And so she said in verse 3 of chapter 8, let his left hand be under my head, and his right hand embrace me. We see this refrain again in verse 4. I want you to swear, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. So again, there's always this idea that we see there's a time for every season. There's a time for love. And so there has to be a really spiritual awakening to understand the power of love. And this also brings us back as in this repetition, emphasizing a point in Hebrew literature that they can remember these experiences. Do you think back about your first love? Do you think about the way you felt? Do you think back about when you understood the love of Jesus Christ, when he first loved you? So he remembers this first time, and they love one another, and bringing her to his mother's house, embracing her for this season of love that's awakened by the Spirit. So in verse 6, put me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as severe as Sheol. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, nor will the rivers overflow it. So love is this beautiful immortality symbol. It is something that binds us together and binds us in relationship to God, and that will not be broken. After death, we will have an everlasting, passionate relationship with our God. It is not going to be extinguished. Just as your love, your passion for life is not extinguished as a Christian by any kind of water. O you who sit in the gardens, he says in verse 13, my companions are listening for your voice. Let me hear it. Hurry, my beloved. Be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. So what we see here is that the couple has gone through hard times together, trouble together, maybe even separation, but they come back together in what we call reconciliation. They have found comfort, a real spiritual comfort in their relationship, renewing their love. And it's exciting to them because they're remembering what it was like to have their first love. And exciting as a running animal, like a deer, like a stag, like a gazelle, running on the mountain of this sweet, sweet aroma. And again, we can see this on a higher spiritual level about our relationship to God. We have to have that renewal. We have to have that relationship. We have that reconciliation with God because He first loved us. And so this is a great, great poem about the development of love in our lives. Again, I studied in my own life the ideas not of Solomon as much as the ideas that most people accept today in our society, and that is psychological ideas that are given by Sigmund Freud. In fact, I wrote my dissertation on Freud's search for his own soul. And Freud was creating this whole kind of pseudo theory about what he calls the pleasure principle, that is driving us, our drive to find the other because of the missing father, because of the missing mother, because of these different desires that we have that have to be sublimated, repressed, and let out through the id, through the ego. And so he was looking for love in all the wrong places because ultimately that kind of search for love without God leads you to his other principle, and that's the principle of thanatos, or death. And that is, we all have this kind of death wish to fill our lives with some kind of love before we die. And so if you follow that in the world, it becomes an empty shell, becomes a meaningless shell without the love of Christ. So what are the applications of studying the Song of Solomon? On one hand, the Song of Songs is just simply a lyrical love song. It always reminds me of my youth. It reminds me of my maturity and love, of my marriage, of my wife. It shows the development of love's attraction and the desires that we have until we have a maturity of love that's bonded by true relationships on an emotional and spiritual level. Secondly, This section of the Song of Solomon demonstrates how lovers can support one another, even during these troubled times. And the quarrels that we have, they're just minor disputes that will pass because the binding that we have in love can't be separated from a loving relationship ultimately. And third, the love song parallels our search for God. We're troubled, and we are always seeking God when we're in these moods of trouble. We recognize the beauty of His creation, especially in other human beings and in ourselves, out of His love that He first had for us. He so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son to us. And for the first sensation that God gives us is this sense of physical beauty and attraction to others, or what the Greeks called eros, admiring the beauty of the human body, the wondrously made human body that we see in Psalms. And he gives us the senses that Solomon uses all through his poetry: smell, taste. All these things are part of God's creation, and they should be blessed. They should be seen as creative. They should be seen as the first step in understanding God. And C.S. Lewis does a great job of telling us about these four loves that we grow in his book, The Four Loves, in his radio presentation to the British people on the four loves. And so the second sensation, once we understand that we have this physical desire, is created by God also. It's philia, or a friendship that we have for companionship that grows out of a deeper relationship. We've talked about this with Adam and Eve. It is not good for him to be alone. And so there is a relationship that we build up. And so we say the same thing about Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. The third sensation is created by God, called sorga, or caring, a caring love. And they could be for the beauty of nature, for an animal, even for caring for children, a sense of we care for the other. It's created by God. It's not worshiping nature or worshiping the animals, but it's worshiping the creature of the Creator. And the fourth sensation is the most important one. It is God Himself in the Trinity. John tells us Jesus is love. And we're given the sense of the Trinity, which is a reconciliation of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And this we call agape love. And C.S. Lewis tells us in his book, The Four Loves, that agape is the harmony of all these loves. They all come together, and the love of God is always greater than the sum of its parts. And so all these things are so important to see that as stages of growth. And so we see that as we have sanctification, and we get closer to God and His love. So, what's the ideal agape bond? And that is marriage. It's a special bond. It's between husband, wife, and God, where the spouse is beautiful outwardly, but also more so inwardly, where the spouse is a companion and a friend, just as we have a friend in Jesus, where the appreciation of the environment that's created by the spouses, the home life, is one of loveliness, where the love that we share is a symbol of commitment. And that's what we see in this story, in the Song of Solomon. There's a deeper conviction, there's a deeper commitment that grows. And this grows into our love for God, which will be a everlasting, eternal, and infinite spiritual worship together, just as Christ loved the church.